Hello everybody, it's I, Flamingo Writer here, and it's time now once again to talk about another Magical Girl podcast video for kids. I'm probably in the minority when I say that I didn't have a lot of 4Kids growing up. Sure, I grew up with some shows from this here network, but that was only during the weekends. The only shows I've come up with whenever I started watching this here network would have to be something like One Piece, Yu-Gi-Oh! TMNT 2003, and Sonic X. I guess you could say Pokemon too, but I think Cartoon Network may have made up for that, if anything. But yeah, those were my only exposures to 4Kids if it wasn't obvious already. If you're not familiar with 4Kids, well, it was basically an American TV brand whenever it used to air on around the time era of before 2007 when they defunct themselves. And, well, it's really in the name. They're mostly known for having a lot of anime or some other animated shows in their content to appeal us, the younger audience, to get a hold of it as much as they can. However, if there's one thing that 4Kids is mostly infamous for, it's mostly due to censorship. And I mean a lot of censorship. Like, they censored so much stuff in this here brand to the point where it's obvious that they don't want any kids to realize that, oh no, we can't have anything remarketed to these here kids because what are we, crazy? They go so far as to censor weapons, the plot stories, and everything else to the point where it's pretty obvious. Oh, need I mention they'd also censor something like food, which, let's be honest here, while I find that kind of fucked up, it's also kind of hilarious because we'll never forget that. And let me remind you, they also decided to censor, guess what else? Something that's even dumber, like censoring words, because God forbid if a kid learns English into reading, we're gonna cause a lot of mayhem. I guess that's why, hey, we always have Fahrenheit 451 to join us for. However, I have no time, nor do I even have the qualification to talk about 4Kids. Not just because I don't know what else to say about it that hasn't been said, and plus I don't really have that much to work with. It's because, not just because I didn't grow up with it, but also due to the fact that I highly doubt I'm even qualified to do something like that. But if there is one thing I can give to 4Kids is that despite how stupid it's been for the censorship and for the most amount of memes you see online these days, I wouldn't be so harping on it if it wasn't for the fact that we probably wouldn't have gotten some of this stuff if it wasn't for them in the first place. I mean, without it, we probably wouldn't have gotten into anime if it wasn't for them. Well, that or Toonami may have made up for it due to how much hardcore anime they've gotten. However, if you want a more in-depth look of 4Kids in itself, you can pretty much find those videos elsewhere. But as for today, we're looking at another Magical Girl podcast that came from this. I talked about one of them before, being Ojan Majodoremi. Looking back at that video, I think I could have waited a little longer. Well, as little as it gets, but you have 201 episodes, because I didn't really finish the anime, and plus I'm really far behind as is when it comes to that. But we're not here to talk about Ojan Majodoremi today. No, we're here to talk about a different Magical Girl series. One that's actually with a lot of people these days. That series I'm referring to is Tokyo Mew Mew. Oh, I'm sorry, it's called Mew Mew Power, but for simplicity's sake, I might as well call it Tokyo Mew Mew because that's what I decided to talk about anyways. And it's also fitting because I did hear a lot of people say that this is a must-watch for, even if you're not a Magical Girl fan, you can still watch it at your own leisure. But I put this off so long as it is that I forgot all about it when I started watching it for my Magical Girl podcast. Now I know what you're thinking. Really? This is the series that put you off the longest? Well, there's a reason for that, and we'll explain why in a bit. However, this year's series had two different adaptations, one in 2002, and the other one being in 2022 called Tokyo Mew Mew New, which I'm going to talk about the 2002 series because it's a lot easier and I got a lot to work with. And what's more, Tokyo Mew Mew New, I'll probably give my thoughts on it when we get to it. Though, spoiler alert, I don't really have that much to say on it. So without further ado, let's fight off some aliens and see what these here animal creatures can get a hold of. This is Tokyo. The series focuses around our main character, Ichigo. Ichigo? Okay, you're gonna find out why I snickered at that in a bit. But for right now, let's talk about the story first. Anyways, Ichigo here is trying to ask out the cute boy of their evening, Ayama. However, it seems like she has a hard time doing so because she has a bit of a nervous breakdown when doing so. Except right as they, when going out to talk about if they want to go out with each other, Ayama insists on them going out together, and Ichigo, being pleased about this, really gives off the feeling that this is a big win for. However, one such moment is when things get all topsy-turvy when aliens, yes, really, aliens come from a different planet to try to reclaim Earth as their own, and in the process gets Ichigo zapped with some red data. Red data itself is really what they use for her animal creature in their blood in order to make their DNA infused with the human. But as weird as this is, Ichigo turns into a cat girl in the process, giving her a strawberry bell as well. And as you can probably guess from there, she turns into the Mew Mew metamorphosis by turning into a cat by calling herself Mew Mew Strawberry, which is really fitting considering that she has Strawberry Heart as her own weapon, and as well as the alter ego she goes with. However, it's only for her to find the other girls to recruit the team in order to stop these aliens from reclaiming Earth as their own before anything goes all insane, while also collecting the Mew Aqua still. Now, I will say for a premise like this, it does seem kind of bizarre what I just elaborated to you. A bunch of aliens trying to take over, even though there's only 3 of them, and what's more, we're still trying to figure out what goes on in this year's series. However, Ichigo doesn't really just stay as a girl and match girl for just that. He also has to work at a place in order to work with 2 other guys, Rigo Shiragana and Icho Akasaka, with herself as well as working at a so-called diner or restaurant in order to really show that there's more to it than just that. And yeah, basically everything I described to you is really outlandish at first, but it does make sense as time goes along, especially because Ichigo also has to work as a maid or a full-time maid, depending on what. But it's really more part-time, but it does come into fruition when it comes right down to it of itself. But I will say for a series like this, it does seem like it doesn't make sense what I'm saying in context, but believe me, when you watch this series, it does really sound weird when you start watching it for yourself. Think about it. 5 girls being infused with DNA in order with their own animal stuff that's around endangered animals in order to do this already. Now, I will say first, fighting off aliens along with these here species, I will get to how I feel about this and what's more no one seems to bring up, but don't worry, I will get to it. But let's talk about the girls themselves. Let's start off with Ichigo first. At first glance, you expect her to be what you expect, very carefree, always asking out the cute boy to go out with her, and as well as getting ready for anything, but she also has a quick short temper. Fitting, considering that she does have a cat that has her own DNA, but even so, I do like how he's always ready for action when she wants to be, even though at first glance she didn't know what the hell was going on. And I have to say, her being a cat really does get to me at times. But am I the one who feels like that I have to say this? If I had a nickel every time I see a stupid Puro, a magical girl who's getting turned into a cat, I have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but I think it's weird it happened twice, you know? And I really feel like that's really true in its life, because, get this, it's really clear to me that she does turn into a cat twice in this here series, but not for very long, so you don't have to worry about that. Though, admittedly, I think this may be the first time I see a cat as a heroine rather than, say, a petty a thief or something like that, or maybe to go all badass like Sabrina from Batman. But even with that said, I do like Ichigo's character. But I also like her strawberry bell as well. I mean, seriously, look at this here. It looks really what you expect. Now, at first glance, when I saw this here on pictures and everything, I thought at first it was supposed to be some kind of instrument, but no, it's actually a weapon she uses to get rid of any kind of alien creatures that come into it. Mostly because the animal selves that come into it are mostly called chimera, which are really what infused with the DNA. Yeah, not infused with the DNA like the girls are, but it's really more like, say, they really are really more threats than. But the reason why I snickered at Ichigo's name has to do with because of Studio Puro. Yeah, this series was animated by Studio Puro, who has been known for a lot of anime. Well, just look at some of the stuff they actually have made so far. Yono the Dawn, Naruto, Yu Yu Hakusho, GTO, each and Black Clover. Though when I say Bleach, that's really what comes to mind when I hear the name Ichigo. And I don't know if it's a common name for both genders in Japan, but even so, I just can't help but think Ichigo reminds me of the name for this year's show and for Bleach as well. Seriously. And yeah, there are some other magical girl shows they have, but if I listed everything that they have, we'd be here all day. Oh, and yeah, they have done Tokyo Ghoul, but I'm not going to list everything that Supero has done because, again, we'd be here all day. But who are the other girls that help out our main cat? Well, the next girl we're going to be talking about is Mint, and despite coming off as a bit of a snob, she came from a really wealthy family, she actually does seem like she has better character than we realize. Some people compare her to Rei Hino, but where Rei Hino does have her moments where she will play with Usagi in the more, well, debatably rivalry kind of way. This one in here with Mint, she actually has a lot more to it. Okay, her real name is really Minto, but really Mint and Minto seem like the same name. And she has a bow and arrow for her own weapon, which I think is pretty cool. And her appearance, while I admit that when I first watched this show, I thought all of them would be cats, it turns out that Mint here has the bird for her own power. And I have to say, her transformation sequence is pretty elegant. If you ever watch this show, you're gonna see it as pretty normal for a bird to have. And she also did ballet, if anything to judge by, but it doesn't really get brought up a lot in the series. Pity, because I feel like she would have made a pretty good ballet dancer if any of the plots are anything to judge by. Next up, we have his Retsu. Despite looking like she's really shy and really trying to not spread conflict or anything, she actually does manage to stand up for herself whenever it's necessary. And what's more, her animal is pretty appropriate for her because she has the dolphin as hers. She has this lettuce stance, and yeah, before you ask, I know her Mew Mew name is called Mew Mew Lettuce. I mean, really? I mean, yeah, it does sound like they have more to it than just that, but I felt like that was a bit of a misled for myself because I thought that they would at least name her Kiwi or Lime, but no, it's just lettuce. Isn't that like naming a magical girl Brussels sprout? If so, I don't really want to know. But even so, I do like Retsu. Even if there are times where her character does come off as a bit too shy at times, she does manage to stand up at times, and what's more, she does grow at times during the times of her episodes, and you do. Next up we got is Buling. She speaks in third person, sure, but even with that said, however, she can be a bit crazy. Like, thankfully it's a good kind of crazy, but she has a lot of energy, kind of there with or Zoe from K-pop Demon Hunters in some ways, except more of a circus performer for Bu Ling. Even when she first met Ichigo, she really liked her right away due to having the cattail. And what's more, she uses a lot of energy to fight off these villains. And for someone that's called Mew Mew Pudding, I think that's pretty cute. Also, for her weapon, it's really known as a poo ring ring, and I gotta say, she really knows how to use them, considering she makes a giant pudding in the process when doing so. But I have to say, even for someone who has a lot of energy, she also shows that she has a bit of heart more than she is. Her mother died when she was at a young age, and she's the oldest of a lot of young siblings, mostly younger brothers and one younger sister. So it makes sense why she really cares about her family pretty deeply at times. And appropriate enough for someone who really has a lot of performances, especially during time when she works at the cafe, I think it's only fitting that they actually gave her the monkey. Now, at first glance, when they said something about a lion per se, I didn't know if that meant, like, say, an actual lion, because here I am saying, a lion? Really? That's really what you're gonna give her? But it turns out that no, it's actually supposed to be sort of monkey species. So I give them props for actually clearing that up, because otherwise I'm going to just say lion is not in the title with her character. And what's more, she doesn't seem to have a very intimidating personality. Though admittedly I can't help but think, what if she met Honey from Oron? But that's just me. And finally, for the girls, we got is a who in the name of it says Mew Mew Pomegranate. And yeah, I can definitely tell you she really sticks with what she has. See, her animal for DNA is really the wolf, and I think it's appropriate considering that she does start off what you'd expect. She started off as an aloof at first, and while she does have moments where she can be cold towards others, she does show that she cares about those around her as well. Also, her weapon is a Zakros whip, which personally I think of all the weapons along with Mint's, I think hers may be another a favorite weapon of mine when it comes to the Mew Mews. Unfortunately, hers got censored out in the 4 Kids because religion itself is pretty much avoidable when it comes to that. For fuck's sake, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel pretty bad for anyone who doesn't see that weapon in the 4 Kids dub version because, oh my god, it would have been pretty much hard what it is. Then again, having a cross and a whip together, I don't want to think about the implication. But considering this is a magical girl show, we can't forget our little mascot of her evening, Masha. Not to be confused with Masha and the bear. No, this Masha is this little fuzzy creature who is also an alien, but he usually signals the other characters of where the aliens are headed, and what's more, he usually helps them out at times, though. He's also computer generated, as far as I can tell, because in one episode, the aliens try to get more information from him, and it really drained out some of his energy, which I have to say is pretty cruel, especially because how could you do such a thing to a little guy like this? He kind of reminds me of a fuzzy version of someone like IR from Corrector Yui, another magical girl series I've already talked about. Though, admittedly, I think this may be a little more dual thing than what it could have been. I don't think it'd be us dueling like Yu-Gi-Oh, but what the fuck? Anyways, back to the characters, however, we can't forget our other characters, Akasaka and Ryu, who happen Shirigan, who happened to really go so far as to help the girls out to locate where the aliens are located and stop up any beasts before they take over the entire of this Earth. But it's mostly in Tokyo because what? Should we go in some other places? Am I right? But then again, I'm not expecting this to be like an isekai, but I'm just saying. Anyways, I think I do like how they give a little more backstory into their character, which I won't spoil it for you, but the gist of it is that there are more than just, say, cute boys for the sake for the fangirls to go crazy. And let's be honest, though, if this was one of those fangirl crazy things, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would go hardcore on these here boys. That or the yeah, I should probably mention the aliens, but to be fair, like the water demons from Mermaid Melody, I think the aliens are pretty fun as. And I really mean that. The villains themselves, Key, Pie, and Tart. No, I'm not kidding, those are really their names. And I'm not saying this as in saying the English dub or anything like that. That's really what their names are in the Japanese here. Anyways, these here guys usually try to do whatever they can to reclaim Earth as their own because they are tired of the humans having it for themselves, and the Mews are doing everything they can in order to not have them reclaim it to back as their own. But I have to say, I do like it when they're on screen. Even whenever they bounce off of each other, it's pretty fun to see. But I think it's mostly because of how much they really love to say things like they're trying to reclaim Earth, even if it is. But despite it being silly every now and then, they're not afraid to be a threat at times, especially when it comes to giving off these creatures a very intimidating look. In spite of all of what I said about the characters and all that other stuff, how do I feel about Tokyo Mew Mew is pretty much what I expected, though. But let me tell you a little story, though. When I first heard about Tokyo Mew Mew, I personally didn't know anything about this, except to the time I did, I've only heard about it, as well as the manga. Yeah, I was going to go over this in the beginning of the video, but I didn't want to stretch out too long, but let's talk about the manga of itself. The manga itself has lasted for quite some time, and lasting for several volumes, except it was also a collab written by Reiko Yatoshi and illustrated by Miyake, both of which have made this year's series. And while they have made some other things along the way, this was actually one of, if not their most popular work out there. It really does show, considering that a lot of people are willing to think that there's more to it than just that. But even with that said, however, I think that a lot of people kind of misjudged it just by its own cutesy art style, because, like I said, this is basically the animal let's go do whatever they can to protect Earth and get reclaimed by the aliens. Though, surprisingly enough, So, I'm surprised that nobody ever brought this up, but did anyone ever think that this here series could be surrounded by furries? I mean, think about it. The girls themselves do get transformed into the animals from the DNA that are infused inside of them, and they go so far as to do that while still going back to their normal selves. Also, wasted opportunity for showing them what they're like if they weren't real animals, because the only time we did get to see it one of them into the animal form is Ichigo, where she turns into a literal cat twice in the series. Maybe it's because they didn't have that in the manga, I wouldn't know, but like a lot of shoujo stuff, it's pretty hard to fall behind anyways. But that doesn't mean I really can't support them either. Even if I haven't grown up with this here series, Tokyo Mew Mew really got to me surprised in a lot of ways. But how well, for 2002 series, as time goes on, though, I say it does look pretty well. Up there with Sugar Sugar Rune, they really knew where to put their budget, but even I'll admit, just because they knew where they put it doesn't mean they didn't have any hiccups. I mean, this is a Studio Puro series, so it's not like you're gonna see something top quality or anything. They do go off model at times. They do some stuff that cut corners every now and then. Even in one part where her Ichigo tries to cover her ears up, at one point Ayama seems to get miscolored. I don't know how the hell they did that, but I still don't know if I should find that really funny or if I should say, what the fuck? Anyways, I think the animation itself does look pretty well made, especially for the time period. But like I said, I'm covering I think 2002 series, so I guess if anything, I can at least talk about something else. In this case, let's talk about that 4 Kids dub first. Being real with you here, I'm not gonna say that this is the worst dub out there. In fact, I go so far as saying behind the scenes, I did talk to one of my friends about this, saying that I don't really care for the English dub, but they themselves really didn't mind the English dub. I'm not gonna hold them against that. However, I will say I personally didn't care for it. Okay, to be fair, this is nowhere near the worst dub that 4 Kids has ever licensed. Far from it. As far as I can tell, if I had to pick a worst dub from 4 Kids, it would probably have to be One Piece due to how much there was a lot more censorship than just that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyways, Tokyo Mew Mew. Oh, I'm sorry. It's called Mew Mew Power because fuck you, Tokyo, you were never a real place to begin with. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. It is xenophobic when they did that. Anyways, Mew Mew Power here did so much that I don't have the time or to go over what I think about it overall. But the gist of it is, they really weren't afraid to chop up anything they had, going so far as to censor some scenes out to Americanize the names because fuck you, Ichigo and other names that they had for themselves are not real names. Ichigo was just her nickname. Her real name is Zoe. And while I do like the name Zoe, even I'll admit that's still pretty by all things consider. And let's not forget, it's also worth pointing out that the 4 Kids dub had the audacity to switch up these episodes by saying that, guess what? All that stuff about how they introduced each other didn't really happen. Instead, they go so far as to think that it's only best for us to think that they were all friends from the very beginning. I'm all for having childhood friends and everything, but even I'll admit, at least with something like, say, Sailor Moon, they actually give you more explanation of how they met each other and everything, but Mew Mew Power doesn't even do that. It's also worth pointing out that for some reason, aside from that, they really changed up the theme song into something like, say, it's so hard to fight when you're falling in love. As clunky and stupid as it sounds, I think it's actually a pretty cutesy song regardless of that. It kind of reminds me of what they did with Magical Doremi. Again, I'm sorry about that. Sorry for you English people who really love the English dub so much. I promise not to do this up anymore. But yeah, apparently Mew Mew Power here has the courtesy to do just that. Though I must admit, the other thing that really did bug me about it is how much they cut the episodes in half. The original series had 52 episodes, but when they got it to 4 Kids, they decided to make it into 26 episodes. Only half of that amount they decided to go so far as to think that it's best to chop some scenes up, mix them up a bit, and do. Admit this really could be because they think that kids couldn't get into it and such. But I still feel like I feel pretty bad for those who have seen it. It also doesn't help the fact that this was how much a lot of people are willing to say that this is really the best way we got into America. So if there's one thing I can't be too mad at for kids, at least they actually introduced this show, but I didn't really grow up with this here series. I heard about it, don't get me wrong, I just never watched it, and it has to do with my schedules every now and then. And that sadly, I think about my schedules even nowadays. I thought at first my schedules were all fucked up from my adulthood alone, but no, they were also fucked up when it comes to me as a kid. I didn't grow up with Tokyo Mew Mew, but I'm sure that anyone who did that got the chance to watch it probably enjoyed it more than they realized. Now with that said, I'm not gonna go ahead and banter about it because let's be honest, Tokyo Mew Mew whose English dub is probably not the worst out there, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you're really into for some funny hilariousness of gag dubs, kind of up there with Ghost Stories, another studio series. Though, if you want to see more look depth about how Tokyo Mew Mew lost behind four kids, I'll leave a link in the description by Dora Maney. Yeah, she actually goes more in depth with it more than I could have. And what's more, she actually does tell about what happened during the time. Though, admittedly, I find it kind of funny how I wanted to Tokyo Mew Mew. Meanwhile, she did this last month by the time making this recording. So you almost have nothing to lose. But after all of that, I think it's only fitting to say I don't spoil too much of the story behind it because while I admit that this here series is pretty much what you expect, it's not supposed to be taken seriously, and what's more, it's pretty fun overall. I will say it does have a lot of heart going into it, so that's really what I have to say. Well, that's all I have to say about the series, and I think, wait, we're not done. Oh yeah. After the series was over, though, I think it's only fitting if I talk about two other things. So let's go back to the creators for a second. If you recall, I said before that this year's series was written and by Rihiko Toshida and illustrated by Mia Ikumi. Unfortunately, this would be the part where I would tell you more about their history aside from that, but I think it's only appropriate if I said something about Mia Ikumi. For those who don't know, Mia Ikumi, the illustrator behind Tokyo Mew Mew, if you recall, or in this case don't know, whichever the case, Tokyo Mew Mew lost to Mia who made in 2022 due to heart failure at age 42, which is honestly a damn shame because, if anything, for the reviews I've seen, she seemed to have a lot of passionate fans for her fan base, judging from what I've seen of it, and it's pretty much a sad thing we'll never get to see the light of day for what it is. And this isn't the only time we lost someone from the creative landscape when it comes to mangaka. Remember Yu-Gi-Oh? Yeah, we lost Yu-Gi-Oh's creator, Kazumi Takahashi, with his work. I mean, and I'd have to be honest, his work is something I have seen a little bit as a kid, but like I said, I didn't really grow up with a lot of it to a lot of fucked up schedules every now and then. If it wasn't for that alone, I probably would have dealt more into tribute with either of these here creators, but I sadly can't really unchange what's happened in the past. What's there is there, and I really can't do anything about it when it comes to watching stuff like that. Though, admittedly, that's kind of what it has yet to accomplish, if anything. But we're still not done yet. I might as well talk about Mew Mew Power. I talked about Mew Mew Power, and I talked about the creators and also about the other stuff. So what else is there for me to say? Well, let's talk about Tokyo Power New, and why exactly I'm not going to cover it into a different video. So let's talk about it. Okay, for the record, I'm not going to say that this is a bad series. Far from it. From what I've heard about it, it is pretty decent for all I have heard about it. So why am I not going to talk about a different video? Well, right up there with Sailor Moon Crystal and as well as Cardcaptor's Clear Card, I personally don't think there's anything much for me to say. I mean, let's get this out of the way. What you need to know about Tokyo Mew Mew New is that it's one of those cases where it's shorter so you don't have to worry about the runtime, but at the same time it can be a detriment for some people. Here's what I mean by that. Tokyo Mew Mew New is basically the original series just cut down to lesser episodes. Instead of having 52 episodes like we got 2 seasons of 12 episodes each. Now, I'm fully aware that they wanted to stretch the story a little bit more than what it is, but I can't help but think that's a bit bullshit because you think that they would at least take their time with it. but I know what you're thinking. Maybe they just want to celebrate the 20-year anniversary. One would think so, except I personally feel like it's that and or a tribute to who our past creator, or though Miyakumi, because of how much as an illustrator this series meant a lot to her in a lot of ways, though, which would be appropriate if it wasn't for the fact that they wanted to shove this in as much as they can. The animation was not done by Supero this time, so at least it looks a lot shinier, but it looks more like, say, it kind of reminds me of something like Precure in some cases, where they have shinier and much beautiful detail in their animation, but this wasn't animated by Toei studio. Animation studio. This was made by some other studio, and I'm not gonna lie, it does look alright, but I'm not gonna mince words to you guys. I kind of prefer the older designs. Maybe it's because they look a lot more polished here, and what's more, they look a lot more nostalgic there, but I don't know. Maybe it's because of that's in hindsight of what it is, but that's really what it is. As for the length of episodes, I think it's only fitting if I talk about this for a sec. Now, when it comes to length of episodes, I don't normally want to talk about this in hindsight because I'm not qualified for this, but in writing hindsight, I feel like it was a bit rushed when it came to the new one. The reason why I'm saying this is because, if anything, 2022's Tokyo Mew Mew who knew is more like, say, we might as well chop it up in half because we don't have to exclude filler nonsense. Now, in some cases, I can understand that. You can still make the series worth it, if anything, to judge by. Shows like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and Hellsing Ultimate did that for their shows, and what's more, they stuck with what was more on the manga of itself and still stick closely to what they were adapting. But on the other hand, sometimes just because you make lesser episodes doesn't always mean the quality itself is going to turn out what it is. It's more like it's going to be more rushed than it is, if anything, to judge by. And it seems like say what you want about Studio Pierrot, but at least they actually had story content when it comes to some of those older shows, even though some of their stuff they're still airing now happens to be nothing but filler. And that of itself can hurt a series, if anything. Not to say I don't like Tokyo and Mew Mew New, but at the same time, I wouldn't recommend it if you're not really interested into having something that's rushed or anything like that. Would I recommend it for those after Tokyo Mew Mew? Maybe. It really depends on if you want to watch it or not, which I don't know if it's for everybody, but that's beside the point. Aside from that, I think I have to say Tokyo Mew Mew gave me a lot to work with, more than I wouldn't call it the greatest show out there or anything like that, but from what I can tell, it's still a pretty enjoyable show. It's fun, it's cutesy, and what's more, it's one of those shows that, while it does sound wacky and outlandish on paper, the execution of it turned out to have a lot more heart than it realizes. Plus, I actually will say I started watching this show around the beginning of this month, but as you can probably guess, by the time this video comes out, it took me a lot longer than I've realized. I do apologize for that, but there's nothing I can do about how it's slowing my pace down. Plus, even with that said, however, I had other videos that were part of my videos for this month, if you realize. I talked about Star Giant Productions again in the beginning of this month. I talked about my dad for a tribute, and I've also got to have a game time since that live stream, though, but I can't really say those weren't really fun per se. Though I also maintain if I do that channel update video or something like a channel recap, I'll probably have to talk about what I felt about 2025 for this year. But aside from all of that, I really can't be too mad at myself for not watching Tokyo Mew Mew any further. But even with that said, I still feel bad for putting it off for so long. I do, because I really felt like this is one of those cases where Tokyo Mew Mew is one of those shows right up there with Sailor Moon or Cardcaptor Sakura. If you are an anime fan, you can give it a watch as your own go. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be worth for everybody though. Whether you're into furries or not is completely subjective, but as a featherette myself, I can definitely say it's still worth a watch if anything. But with that said, I don't know when the next video will come out, but hopefully it'll come out maybe before Christmas or maybe on Christmas Day. I can't really make any promises because it's going to take me a while for the next video, but until then, hopefully it'll be showtime before anything else. But until then, I thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay flamingo-tastic. I'll see you all around.